The lights inside Earl's Court in London dimmed, the crowd roared, and time itself seemed to hold its breath. In that charged silence, one moment would unfold that no one inside the arena and no one watching around the world would ever forget. When Beyoncé stepped forward to honor Michael Jackson, the world wasn't just watching an award being handed over. It was witnessing history being rewritten in real time. Before we dive into this unforgettable night, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another untold story. The year was 2006. The place was London. The occasion was the World Music Awards, one of the most prestigious global celebrations of musical achievement. But this wasn't just another ceremony. This was the night Michael Jackson, the king of pop, would stun the world in a way no one saw coming. To understand the power of this moment, we have to step back into the atmosphere of that night, the energy, the anticipation, the quiet tension that filled the air as celebrities, industry giants, and fans from around the globe gathered inside Earl's Court. Hosted by actress Lindsay Lohan, the 18th World Music Awards promised glamour, surprises, and star power. Yet even among legends, one name carried a weight no other could match: Michael Jackson. By 2006, Michael Jackson had already lived multiple lifetimes in the public eye. From child prodigy to global icon, from record-breaking superstardom to deeply personal struggles, his story was one of triumph, controversy, resilience, and reinvention. The world had seen him rise, fall, and rise again, and many wondered if he would ever truly reclaim the magic that once defined him. That night he walked into Earl's Court not just as a performer or a celebrity, but as a symbol of music's power to transcend generations, cultures, and controversies. And as he took his seat, few could have imagined that within minutes, he would once again command the world's attention, not through dance, not through song, but through a moment of pure emotional truth. The World Music Awards had prepared a special honor, one that went beyond charts, trophies, or temporary fame. It was called the Diamond Award, reserved for artists who had sold more than 100 million albums over the course of their careers. Only a handful of musicians in history qualified for such recognition, and among them, Michael Jackson stood unmatched. But what no one anticipated was who would step forward to present this award. As the lights shifted and the camera panned across the audience, a hush spread through the room. Then, the announcer's voice echoed across the hall, introducing one of the most powerful voices of the new generation, Beyoncé. At that moment, two eras of music collided. Beyoncé, a global superstar in her own right, represented the future, fierce, modern, and unstoppable. Michael Jackson represented the past, the present, and the blueprint of what pop stardom could become. This was not just a handover of an award. It was the passing of a symbolic torch between generations. As Beyoncé walked onto the stage, the audience erupted. Her presence alone electrified the room, but there was a deeper emotion beneath the applause: respect, reverence, and awe. She wasn't just introducing a fellow artist. She was honoring a legend who had paved the road she now walked. She spoke with warmth, humility, and admiration, acknowledging the extraordinary impact Michael Jackson had on music, culture, and the world. Her voice trembled slightly, not from nerves, but from the gravity of the moment. Standing before her was the man whose music had shaped her childhood, whose performances had set the standard, whose legacy had influenced countless artists, including herself. And then she called his name. The crowd exploded. Michael Jackson rose from his seat, and as he did, something shifted in the room. There was an unmistakable energy, a collective intake of breath, as if everyone present understood that they were about to witness something more than an award presentation. They were about to witness a defining moment in music history. He walked toward the stage with a calm, measured grace, not rushed, not dramatic, just quiet confidence, the kind that only comes from someone who has nothing left to prove, yet everything left to give. When Beyoncé handed Michael Jackson the Diamond Award, The moment froze in time. Cameras flashed, the audience stood. The applause roared louder and louder until it felt like the walls themselves might shake. But it wasn't just applause, it was gratitude. It was recognition. It was the world collectively saying, "We remember, we honor, we thank you." Michael Jackson took the award in his hands, and for a brief second he simply looked at it. Not with pride, not with triumph, but with something far more profound: reflection. Then he approached the microphone. What followed was not a rehearsed speech. It was not a polished performance. It was not a promotional moment. It was a raw, heartfelt expression from a man who had carried the weight of fame, expectation, and public scrutiny for nearly 4 decades. He began by thanking the fans. Not the industry, not the awards committees, not the critics. The fans. "I'd like to thank my fans all over the world," he said. And as those words left his lips, something changed in the room. His voice carried a vulnerability rarely seen on such grand stages. He spoke not as a superstar, but as a human being, someone who had been supported, lifted, and loved by millions, even through his darkest moments. He spoke of gratitude, he spoke of love, he spoke of unity. And in that moment, the world didn't see controversy. The world didn't see headlines. The world didn't see rumors or accusations. The world saw Michael Jackson, the artist, the dreamer, the child at heart who once danced on moonlit sidewalks and imagined changing the world through music. But then something unexpected happened. As he continued speaking, his emotions became more visible. His voice softened. His eyes glistened. And suddenly, the man who once seemed untouchable, larger than life, appeared deeply human. The crowd grew quieter. The applause faded into silence. People leaned forward in their seats, sensing that something deeply personal was unfolding. Michael Jackson spoke about the journey. Not just the success, but the struggle. Not just the records, but the resilience. Not just the fame, but the faith that carried him through moments when the world had turned against him. He didn't name the battles. He didn't dwell on the pain. But it was all there beneath the surface, in his pauses, in his breath, in the way he chose his words carefully, as though each one carried the weight of years. And then he said something that stunned the room. He spoke about love being the most powerful force in the world. He spoke about believing in goodness. He spoke about how music had always been his way of healing, both himself and others. In a room filled with celebrities, power, and prestige, Michael Jackson reminded everyone of something far more important: humanity. This was not just an acceptance speech. This was a confession. This was a reflection. This was a moment of truth. And the world watched transfixed. But the story doesn't end there. Because behind this historic award and emotional speech lies a deeper narrative, one that many never fully realized. By 2006, Michael Jackson had not released a studio album in several years. He had stepped away from the spotlight, retreated from public life, and faced intense personal and legal challenges that had nearly destroyed his career. Many in the media had written him off. Some believed he would never truly return. Yet that night, standing on the stage of the World Music Awards, he wasn't just receiving an award, he was reclaiming his place. The Diamond Award symbolized more than sales figures. It symbolized survival. It symbolized endurance. It symbolized a legacy that could not be erased by controversy or time. It symbolized a man who had given his entire life to music and had nearly lost himself in the process, yet still stood, still dreamed, still believed. And then came another twist. Earlier that evening, Michael Jackson had performed. Not just any performance, but a performance that sent shockwaves across the world. He took the stage to perform a medley of his greatest hits, including Thriller and We Are the World. For many fans, this was the first time they had seen him perform live in years. Expectations were high, doubts were louder. Could he still move like before? Could he still command the stage? Could he still capture the magic? The answer came the moment the music started. He didn't dance like the young Michael Jackson of the 1980s, but he didn't need to. He moved with purpose. He sang with conviction. He stood with authority. And the crowd responded, not with nostalgia, but with awe. The performance wasn't about recreating the past. It was about honoring it and proving that the spirit of Michael Jackson was still alive. Yet even as the performance electrified audiences, it was the award presentation that truly shook the world. Why? Because no one expected Michael Jackson to be vulnerable. No one expected him to be emotional. No one expected him to be human. For decades, Michael Jackson had been mythologized. He was no longer seen as a man, but as a phenomenon, a mystery, a legend. That night, he shattered that illusion. He stood on that stage not as a myth, but as a man grateful, humbled, and deeply moved. And in doing so, he reminded the world why they fell in love with him in the first place. But there was something else, something even more powerful, hidden within that moment. The presence of Beyoncé. Her role in that night was more than symbolic. She wasn't just a presenter, she was a witness. A witness to the power of legacy. A witness to the responsibility of greatness. A witness to the emotional cost of brilliance. When she stood beside Michael Jackson, the contrast between their journeys was striking. She was at the peak of her career. He was at a crossroads. She represented momentum. He represented memory. Yet in that moment they were equals, not in fame, not in age, but in purpose. Both had dedicated their lives to music. Both had sacrificed privacy. Both had faced unimaginable pressure. And both understood the price of greatness. That moment on stage was not just about honoring Michael Jackson. It was about acknowledging the lineage of musical excellence. It was about recognizing that today's stars stand on the shoulders of yesterday's legends. And Beyoncé knew that. Her presence wasn't about glamour. It was about gratitude. It was about respect. It was about legacy. And Michael Jackson felt it. You could see it in the way he looked at her. Not as a superstar. Not as a colleague. But as a symbol of the future he had helped create. The future of music. The future of performance. The future of artistry. And that realization that his influence lived on, that his work mattered, that his legacy was secure, hit him harder than any award ever could. That's when the world truly saw him stunned. Not by applause. Not by fame. Not by recognition. But by love. The love of fans. The love of fellow artists. The love of a generation he had inspired. This wasn't just a comeback moment. This was a redemption moment. A restoration. A reminder. And yet behind the scenes, there were layers to this story that few ever learned. At the time of the World Music Awards 2006, Michael Jackson was quietly planning what would become one of the most ambitious comebacks in music history. The This Is It concerts. Though the world wouldn't hear about it until years later, seeds were already being planted. He was dreaming again. He was creating again. He was imagining again. That night wasn't the end of a story. It was the beginning of a new chapter. And that's what makes this moment so haunting and so powerful in hindsight. Because just 3 years later, the world would lose Michael Jackson forever. And suddenly, that night in London became more than an award ceremony. It became a farewell. Not in words, not in intention, but in meaning. When we look back at that moment now, knowing what we know, it feels different. The applause feels heavier. The tears feel deeper. The gratitude feels more urgent. And his words about love, about unity, about healing feel almost prophetic. It's as if he knew, as if he sensed that time was limited, as if he wanted, one last time, to remind the world of what truly mattered. Not fame, not records, not awards, but connection, but love, but humanity. And that's why this moment continues to live on. Not because of the Diamond Award, not because of Beyoncé's presence, not because of the cameras or the applause, but because of the emotion, because of the vulnerability, because of the truth. This wasn't just Michael Jackson receiving an award. This was Michael Jackson revealing his soul. And the world was watching. But there's another layer to this story, one that often goes unnoticed. The World Music Awards 2006 was not just a celebration of Michael Jackson's past. It was also a statement about the future of music. By honoring him with the Diamond Award, the industry was acknowledging something profound, that true artistry is timeless. Trends change, genres evolve, technology advances, but the power of music to move hearts, inspire minds, and unite people across cultures remains unchanged. Michael Jackson embodied that truth. His music transcended language. His performances transcended borders. His message transcended generations. And that's why, even in 2006, in an era of new sounds, new stars, and new platforms, his presence still commanded reverence. He wasn't just relevant. He was eternal. And Beyoncé, standing there, symbolized that continuity. She represented the next wave of artists who would carry that torch. Artists who understood that music is not just entertainment, but expression. Not just business, but belief. Not just fame, but faith. And in that moment, as she handed him the award, it felt like a sacred exchange. Not of power, not of status, but of purpose. But even as the world celebrated Michael Jackson that night, he remained deeply introspective. Those who were close to him at the time described him as quiet, reflective, and emotionally complex. He had experienced more than most people could ever imagine, both good and bad, and he carried those experiences within him. That night on that stage, those experiences surfaced. Not in anger, not in bitterness, but in gratitude. And that's what made it so powerful. Because gratitude, when it comes from someone who has suffered, carries a different weight. It's not superficial. It's not automatic. It's earned. Michael Jackson's gratitude that night wasn't polite. It was profound. He wasn't just thanking fans for their support. He was thanking them for their faith, for their loyalty, for their belief, even when the world doubted him. And that gratitude stunned the world. Because no one expected Michael Jackson, a man who had been worshipped, idolized, and mythologized, to stand on that stage and speak like someone who had been saved. Saved by music. Saved by love. Saved by people. That moment redefined him. Not as the king of pop. Not as the biggest star in the world. But as a human being who had been wounded, healed, and transformed. And that transformation was visible. You could see it in his eyes. You could hear it in his voice. You could feel it in the room. The energy shifted. The crowd wasn't just cheering. They were connecting. And connection is rare in spaces filled with fame. It's rare on stages filled with lights. It's rare in rooms filled with power. Yet that night, connection happened. Between Michael Jackson and the audience. Between Michael Jackson and Beyoncé. Between Michael Jackson and the world. And that's what makes this moment legendary. Not because of the award, but because of the humanity. But let's go deeper. Why did this moment resonate so strongly? Why did it leave such a lasting impact? Why does it continue to be discussed, remembered, and revisited? Because it wasn't just about Michael Jackson. It was about us. It was about how we treat our heroes. It was about how we judge, celebrate, criticize, and sometimes abandon the people who shape our culture. Michael Jackson had given the world countless gifts: music, dance, inspiration, joy. Yet he had also been subjected to intense scrutiny, relentless media pressure, and personal struggles that few could endure. That night, when he stood on that stage and spoke with humility and gratitude, it forced the world to confront something uncomfortable. That perhaps we had forgotten his humanity. That perhaps we had reduced him to headlines. That perhaps we had consumed his art without always understanding his pain. And in that moment, the world felt something. Not just admiration, not just nostalgia, but empathy. And empathy changes everything. Because empathy humanizes. It softens. It heals. And that's what happened that night. The audience didn't just see Michael Jackson. They felt him. They felt his journey. They felt his struggle. They felt his gratitude. And in feeling him, they remembered why they loved him in the first place. Not because he was perfect. Not because he was flawless. But because he was human. And because his humanity was expressed through art. Through music. Through movement. Through love. But there's another surprising element to this story, one that adds even more depth to the moment. The Diamond Award that Michael Jackson received was not just a recognition of his sales. It was a recognition of his global impact. He wasn't just popular in one country. He wasn't just influential in one culture. He wasn't just relevant in one generation. He was global. His music reached villages and cities, rich and poor, young and old, across continents and languages. From Africa to Asia. From Europe to the Americas. From remote communities to global capitals. Michael Jackson's music became a shared language. A shared rhythm. A shared heartbeat. And that's what the Diamond Award truly represented. Not numbers. Not charts. Not profits. But people. Millions of people who had danced to his songs, cried to his lyrics, healed through his melodies, dreamed through his art. And when Beyoncé handed him that award, she wasn't just honoring a man. She was honoring a movement of sound, a movement of emotion, a movement of unity. And Michael Jackson knew it. That's why his speech wasn't about himself. It was about the fans. Because without them, there would be no legacy, no movement, no magic. And that humility, that recognition stunned the world. Because greatness, when combined with humility, becomes something extraordinary. It becomes inspirational. It becomes transformational. It becomes eternal. And that's what Michael Jackson became that night. Not just a legend, but a reminder. A reminder of what art can do. A reminder of what music can mean. A reminder of what love can heal. But let's talk about the emotional undercurrent of this moment. There was something in the air that night, something unspoken yet deeply felt. A sense of fragility. A sense of urgency. A sense that this moment mattered more than anyone realized. Some fans later described feeling chills. Some described feeling emotional without knowing why. Some described feeling as though they were witnessing something sacred. And in hindsight, those feelings make sense. Because this was one of the last times the world would see Michael Jackson honored in such a public, global, celebratory way. It was one of the last times he would stand on a stage and speak directly to his fans. It was one of the last times the world would see him not as a headline, not as a rumor, not as a controversy, but as a man being celebrated. And that knowledge, though it came later, transforms the meaning of that night. It becomes a farewell without being labeled as one, a goodbye disguised as a celebration, a final bow without curtains closing. And that's what makes it so haunting, so beautiful, so unforgettable. Because farewell moments, when unplanned, carry a different kind of weight. They are not rehearsed. They are not scripted. They are not prepared. They simply happen. And when they do, they leave a mark. Michael Jackson's Diamond Award moment left a mark. On the industry, on the fans, on the world, and on history. But perhaps the most powerful part of this story is not what happened on stage, but what happened inside the hearts of those watching. Fans around the world, watching from their homes, felt something shift. Some felt closure. Some felt hope. Some felt forgiveness. Some felt renewed love. Some felt nostalgia. Some felt peace. And many felt something else, something deeper, a sense of connection. Connection to an artist who had shaped their childhood. Connection to a voice that had been present in their happiest and darkest moments. Connection to a rhythm that had accompanied their lives. And that connection, reignited that night, reminded the world of something essential. That music is not just sound. It is memory. It is emotion. It is identity. And Michael Jackson's music was not just entertainment. It was a soundtrack to millions of lives. That's why this moment mattered. That's why it stunned the world. Not because of spectacle, but because of significance. But now, let's revisit the scene one last time. The lights, the stage, the applause. Beyoncé standing there, holding the Diamond Award. Michael Jackson stepping forward. The crowd rising. The cameras flashing. The silence before he spoke. His voice soft yet steady. His words simple yet profound. His eyes reflective yet hopeful. And in that moment, everything aligned. Past, present, future, legacy, love, humanity. It all came together. And for a brief moment, the world was united. United in respect. United in gratitude. United in admiration. United in emotion. That is the power of music. That is the power of art. That is the power of Michael Jackson. And that is why this moment continues to live on, not as a memory, but as a feeling. A feeling of awe. A feeling of connection. A feeling of gratitude. A feeling of humanity. A feeling of love. And now, as we reflect on this historic night, we are reminded of something essential. That behind every legend is a human being. That behind every icon is a heart. That behind every masterpiece is a story. And that behind every award is a journey, often filled with struggle, sacrifice, and resilience. Michael Jackson's journey was extraordinary, but it was also deeply human. And that's what makes his legacy timeless. Because perfection fades, but humanity endures. And Michael Jackson's humanity, revealed so clearly on that stage in 2006, is what truly stunned the world. Not his fame, not his sales, not his awards, but his heart. And that heart, even now, continues to beat through his music, his message, and his memory. As we close this story, we are left with a simple truth. That night, Michael Jackson didn't just receive an award. He gave the world a gift. The gift of vulnerability. The gift of gratitude. The gift of humanity. And that gift continues to inspire, heal, and unite people around the world. Because true greatness is not measured by trophies. It is measured by impact. And Michael Jackson's impact will echo forever. And as the echoes of that night continue to ripple through time, the story of Michael Jackson at the World Music Awards 2006 takes on an even deeper meaning. What once seemed like a triumphant return now feels like a sacred pause, a moment where the world and a legend met at the same emotional crossroads. Long after the applause faded and the lights dimmed, fans replayed that scene again and again, not because of spectacle but because of sincerity. In an era when celebrity often feels distant and untouchable, Michael Jackson stood on that stage with a humility that felt almost shocking. He wasn't performing. He wasn't acting. He wasn't hiding. He was simply being. And that authenticity created a bond stronger than any performance ever could. What many don't realize is that this moment also quietly reshaped how Michael Jackson was perceived in the years that followed. For some, it reopened doors of compassion. For others, it restored a sense of respect. And for countless fans, it became a reminder that behind every public figure is a private struggle, and behind every struggle is a human heart longing to be understood. In that sense, the Diamond Award was not just recognition of past achievements. It was a bridge between Michael Jackson and the world, a bridge between who he was and who he hoped to become, a bridge between pain and healing. And then there was Beyoncé. Her presence that night continues to resonate not just as a symbolic gesture, but as a powerful moment of unity across generations. Two artists, two journeys, two eras meeting at a single point of respect and recognition. She did not simply hand him an award. She honored his legacy, validated his influence, and acknowledged the path he carved for artists like herself. That exchange said something profound without speaking a word. That music is a lineage, not a competition. That every voice stands on the echoes of those who came before, and that honoring the past is essential to shaping the future. For Michael Jackson, that recognition mattered deeply. Not because he needed validation, his achievements were already written into history, but because he valued connection. He valued love. He valued being seen not just as a legend, but as a person. And that night he was seen. Seen by fans. Seen by fellow artists. Seen by the world. In the years since, as the world continues to celebrate his life, his art, and his legacy, that moment in London stands as a powerful reminder of who Michael Jackson truly was, not just the king of pop, but a man driven by creativity, compassion, and an unshakable belief in the power of love. Because long after the awards have been shelved and the stages have been dismantled, what remains is not the trophy, but the truth. And the truth is this: Michael Jackson changed the world not just through music, but through emotion, not just through performance, but through presence, not just through fame, but through feeling. That night at the World Music Awards 2006 was not an ending. It was a reflection of a life lived in sound, a reflection of a soul shaped by rhythm, a reflection of a legacy defined not by perfection, but by passion. And as we carry this story forward, we are reminded that moments like these do not belong to the past. They live on in the hearts of those who remember, those who feel, and those who continue to be inspired. Michael Jackson may have left the stage, but he never left the world. He lives in every beat, every melody, every memory, and every moment when music reminds us of who we are. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share, because legends live on when their stories are told and their music is remembered.